Hey, AOLers, thanks for coming today, and today is a really exciting day. You're going to hear a whole bunch of new information about stuff that the company's doing, but I wanted to just introduce the Build series this week based on something that personally happened. We had our AOL management meeting where about 70 of the top people from across the globe came to New York a couple weeks ago, and while we were in the meeting, we were talking about investing more in women's leadership, content, coding, those type of things. And my mom is in her 70s and just went back to work as the HR director of a publishing company. And she sent me a note in the meeting saying, "There's this organization called Girls Who Code. Why doesn't AOL get together and do something with them? It seems like you guys are going to fall behind if you don't start thinking this way." You know, in general. And I read the email. I was trying to find it. I couldn't find it, but I read the email to our executives. But one of the things that's been really, I think, inspiring about Girls Who Code is the leadership of Girls Who Code. And there's a number of them here today. I'm going to introduce them after a short video plays. But it's really impactful to have someone who's going to join us who is author of a very important book, and she'll talk about that book. On every single list you can imagine, from the Fortune's most powerful women, just got named in New York Daily News as one of the 50 most powerful women in New York City, and there's numerous other things, awards that she's won, and she's going to get interviewed by another one of Fortune most powerful women who works at AOL, which is great. And the thing I think we've always talked about, and if you go back and look at some of the things we talked about a few years ago, was that having women's content with things we've done with like makers and other programs that were really impactful. But the biggest thing we wanted to do was have a workforce that was full of women and diverse people, because the internet, to a large degree, there are cases where it hasn't been, but in many, many cases it's been built with a male perspective on top of it. And we were lucky to get one of the best entrepreneurs in the world, who's a woman, Ariana, to come here. But I think what you're going to hear about today is really the next evolution of what the company's doing in this space. So I want to roll a quick video and then introduce our two guests.
I always say, like, sponsorship is the new feminism. And I think part of that right now is that we are in a position to really help one another. Even right now, as I'm launching my public advocate campaign, it's women who are throwing my first tax parties, who are writing me my first checks, who are pulling in their editor's sleeves, being like, "You got to write the story." We're able to really use our power and our leverage to uplift one another. Mentorship is really important to me, and I really hope that I'll be able to be a role model for so many young women who are doing incredible things in their communities. It's like my girls and Girls Who Code, like, they're my heroes. They're the people that I look up to every single day. They're the ones who charge me up, who give me inspiration.
So I want to bring Reshma up and Susan Line, but one of the things that we've decided to do as a business is really partner with game-changing talent overall, and there's probably no bigger need if you look at the United States forward 5 to 10 years. As a matter of fact, national security issue and an issue for all of us in the internet business is where are the future talent going to come from, especially has to do with engineering, design, and product. And I think this single person will probably have the single biggest effect in our industry and in the world on what's going to happen. And we're delighted to have her join us on stage today, along with Susan Line, who's another Fortune magazine most powerful women. So welcome, Reshma and Susan.
Okay, now you can hear me. Great. So I think you all know that we announced a partnership today between Cambio and Girls Who Code. We have 5 graduates of Girls Who Code who are with us for the summer, who are going to be rebuilding Cambio and hopefully making Cambio their laboratory going forward. And the 5 are right here in the front row, and I just want you to stand up for 1 second so everyone can see you. They are awesome, and they're already having a great impact. So we're really looking forward to another couple of months with you. Reshma.
Susan.
I want to start with your personal journey because you have such a great background. You went to Yale Law School, you went to the Kennedy School. You could have written your ticket anywhere, and you've chosen to launch Girls Who Code. So just talk a little bit about what got you here.
Sure. I first want to say a huge thank you to Susan. I met Susan several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, when I was embarking on a run for Congress, United States Congress. I was running against an 18-year Democratic incumbent, which was a total no-no. So most people wouldn't talk to me. But Susan not only talked to me, but she had lunch with me and she supported me. And when Girls Who Code was just an idea in my head, I reached back out to Susan again. And so she's always been there for me. And one of the things I feel so passionately about in life is that, you know, you can only bring about change when you find out who your believers are. And I am blessed to have Susan as one of my believers, so I want to say thank you. And you're all super lucky to be having her here at the helm of the company because she's incredible. So I guess a little bit about me. My family came here as refugees from Uganda. And I grew up with 2 engineers. Even though my father was a trained engineer, he worked as a mechanic. My mother sold cosmetics before they were able to actually get jobs. And I was one of those little girls that was terrified of math and science. My father would sit me at the table and he'd say, Reshma, what's 2 + 2? I'd say 5. You know, the only B I ever got in college was in chemistry. I used to copy my statistics homework from my friends at the Kennedy School. I was terrified. And it was something that haunted me my entire professional career. And so when I did run for Congress and really saw what was happening with technology in the city, you know, as a feminist, feminist with a capital F, I was like, you know, where are the women? Like, where are the young girls? Why are we not a part of this growth? And I thought about my own experience and how I felt so intimidated by math and science. And I didn't want any young girl to feel that way again. So that's really what led me to start Girls Who Code. And to be honest, you know, we just launched our New York programs today. When I think about my first program in New York, we were just starting a pilot program. Right. Like, we didn't know it was going to go from 20 girls to 3,000 girls 2 years later. And I think you were one of the people who said to me, just try it. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think we could have anticipated that we'd be standing here only 3 years later.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just so incredible to see how it's taken the country by storm. It was an idea that was meant to be. And when that happens and you see people just running to it instead of you having to run to them, that's magic.
Yeah.
So you quote a statistic frequently that in 1984, I think it's 37% of computer science grads were women. Last year, I think it was 12%. Right. So there's been a huge drop. Why is that happening, and what are the ways we can change it?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, so 71% of the jobs that are in STEM are in computer science. And this is the only industry where we've actually seen a decline in women. Arguably, there were more women on the first Apple team than there were in any first team today. And it's the only industry where you've seen that kind of stark decline at the same time as we as a society are becoming more digitally engaged. 4-year girls are actually more digitally engaged than boys. Girls perform better on math and science tests, right? But then something happens around that 7th and 8th grade. And not to simplify it, but I think a lot of it is culture, right? We live in a society that says to girls, don't play too hard, you know, don't build, don't create. And when you think about the fact that we have dolls that say, I hate math, let's go shopping instead. The fact that you can walk into Forever 21 right down the corner and buy a t-shirt that says, I'm allergic to algebra. The fact that we have a show on HBO that has basically no depictions of women as entrepreneurs, right? Our girls are watching and they're listening. And what we're saying to them is, you're not smart enough. You're not good enough. This isn't for you. And they're opting out. And it is the most important domestic issue of our country's time, not because of gender parity for the sake of gender parity, but because of what these women, these future female coders and entrepreneurs were going to create. Roxy, right? These are one of our young girls, Natalia, right? They want to build an app to help fight bullying. They want to build algorithms to help detect false positives in breast cancer testing. They want to create products that are going to make our world, our community, a better place, and this is what they're thinking about. They don't want to go into a basement and build video games.
Right. And that, I think, gets to something that is really key here. You know, the woman who is now the president of Harvey Mudd College, who is an engineer herself, and when she came to Harvey Mudd back in 2006, she found that only 9% of the students were going, or the female students were going into computer science, and she looked at why that was happening and actually came to the conclusion that it was because they were teaching it in a way that was totally abstract. It wasn't about building things. And once they shifted the way they taught that first introductory course and made it about real problem solving, they were able to get it up well over 30%. And I heard from somebody today that it may even be over 50% now. So that's clearly something that is one way for us to get around
And
this.
that's exactly what we do with our curriculum. We do project-based learning.
Yeah.
So for us, 95% of our girls, when they graduate our program, are majoring and minoring in computer science, whereas the national average is 0.3%. So you can actually, you know, I think about it, like last year, 7,500 women graduated in CS. Like 380 girls are going to graduate our program this summer. If half of them major in CS, we can flip the numbers in a decade. Like that's powerful. Like where else, right? Within a decade, can you completely change those numbers? I mean, I always say this, in the 1970s, 10% of doctors and lawyers were women. How many of you in this room know a female doctor or lawyer, right? Every single one of you. If I asked you that 40 years ago, those same hands wouldn't go up. But we were able to make that kind of change because we committed to it. And because of Grey's Anatomy and LA Law, right?
Yeah.
And Ally McBeal. We constantly were inundated with images of women who looked like us. And I said, yeah, I can be a lawyer. And that's why what we're doing here at Cambio is so critical, because we got to meet girls where we're at.
Yep.
And they all love Beyonce, right? We just do. You know, you love Beyonce, you love that. I mean, we have to meet girls where they are.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute, because you've done a lot of partnerships with companies. What's different about this Cambio AOL partnership?
Well, when we started brainstorming what we wanted to do this year as part of the movement to really inspire young girls, and when we kind of focus grouped our girls and said, okay, what is going to inspire your friends to learn how to code? Is it Beyonce Instagramming a picture of herself coding? Is it Hillary Clinton? Like, what is it? And what we heard over and over and over again, it's the message that girls want to build cool things. And when they see girls building cool things, they'll want to do it too.
Yeah.
And so that's why you actually approached me with this brilliant idea. And I was like, of course, Susan is brilliant. With this idea of like, what if we created a site, right, that was built by girls and really promoted that message. And I think that it's gonna be that thing, that tipping point that we know happened in the 70s, right, with doctors and lawyers.
Absolutely.
I think that's what it's gonna be for us.
Yeah. So you talk about sponsorship a lot, and I want to call out someone who I sponsor here, Nisha Dua. Where are you? Because this was really Nisha Dua's idea, and I get to try and push it up the chain constantly, but I think it is really important. And why don't you talk a little bit about why you think it's so important, and what people in this room can do to really make that a part of their work lives?
Look, I think as women, you know, hopefully a very special mentor and sponsor of mine is going to be running for president soon. And, you know, when I recently lost my public advocate campaign, you know, one of the first phone calls I got was from her. To be like, are you okay?
So that would be Hillary Clinton.
To be like, just like make sure you do that again. And so we need women like that in our lives, that when we're at our darkest moment, when we think the whole world has crashed around us and we cannot do that again, we need those women to pick us up. And I have women like that in my life. You're one of those women for me in my life. And I think that if we think about why the numbers aren't changing, it's not about men anymore. It's not about sexism. Like, we're powerful. We're the majority in the ballot box, the majority in the workforce, the majority of breadwinners. And it's time for us to start supporting one another and really creating a girls' club that's uplifting one another. These girls, when they graduated Girls Who Code, I gave them one requirement. I said, you've been given a gift and you must pay it forward. You must teach at least one young woman in your life how to computer program. And they are our biggest ambassadors. I mean, they show up at every event. They've all recruited other young girls that are in the program this year. They are the ambassadors for the movement that we're building. And it's because of them and the work that they're doing that we're gonna change these numbers. And I think really inspiring that message at a really young age, because, I mean, let's be real, like, women, we're not nice to each other sometimes, right? You know what I'm talking about? And we gotta deal with that.
So I want to open this up to other people to ask questions, but I'm going to ask one more question while you're thinking about your questions, which is, why is this important beyond just the obvious, which is we want to have gender parity everywhere, but is there something more here that is at play?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a coder. I'm learning how to code now.
And you can teach me.
Right? But this is the issue that I wake up every morning and think about, and it's because of the products that these girls and the solutions that they're gonna put to the world. And when we had our first summer, that became very clear to me. So the way, for us, what we do in the last 2 weeks of our program is we say to our girls, create something, build something. You can build anything, and they get into teams. And I remember our first summer, the ideas that came out of that were Cora, who was 5 years old when her father was diagnosed with cancer. She said, all right, I'm gonna build an algorithm to help detect false positives in breast cancer testing, right? Leslie started building websites to help immigrant entrepreneurs. The year later, our girls built an app to help parents who are deciding between schools in that 8th grade year. They get basically this huge, I don't know if there's any parents in this room, but you basically get that, if you're in public school, you get this big booklet that's like this big that says, all right, figure out what school you think your child should go to. If you're a working parent, you can't it's impossible. So they built a mobile app to help parents navigate that process. So idea after idea after idea was about the community and the world. And for me, I feel like I have no doubt that one of these young girls is gonna find a cure to cancer in 40 years, and so many of the other problems that we're facing in terms of international development, human trafficking, et cetera. Technology is the solution to many of these things. But if we are not equipping our young women with a skill set to use technology to solve those problems, we're not gonna advance as a nation.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. If there's not a seat at the table, this is where all the great innovation is going to take place. So having women at that table to make sure that their ideas, our ideas, are being recognized and are part of the priority list is just critically important.
And it's happening. I mean, listen, after Social Network, I feel like every young boy wants to be Mark Zuckerberg, right?
Yeah.
And build the next Facebook. But we have to inspire that same generation of young women who are not motivated by making money, right? They're motivated by community and changing the world. And so we have to tap into that inspiration and show them why and how technology is so important to doing that very thing.
Okay, questions from the audience. And I'm going to come back at the very end and do our fast round, because there are certain questions we ask everybody. Who wants to ask a first question? Yeah, great.
Roxy inspired me so much, and all it took was one summer to change my life, and I thank you for that, and I'm so grateful. And I was just wondering, who were the role models that you had growing up, especially women, because seeing you accomplish all of these great things, that's inspiring to me.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel the same way about you. So I'm gonna say, so if you were to ask me that question right now, I genuinely, it's all of you. Like you really, each of you inspire me, because you know how many of the girls in our program get on 2 buses and 2 subways to get to class, right? That are going through a lot of challenging circumstances. I get frustrated when I was trying to learn Scratch and make the paddle ball hit the wall. I wanted to shoot myself, right? But you sit there and you do it every single day and you create and build, and so you inspire me. You know, when I was growing up, I grew up with parents that worked all the time. I was a latchkey kid. I was in detention all the time. I was one of those bad kids, I admit it. But my teachers believed in me, and they saw something special in me. And they're really, I think, the reason why I'm here today. Because they believed in me, and they kept me, you know, working hard and like wanting to achieve my dreams.
That's a great question. And someone back here I saw, yep.
Hi.
Hi.
So you mentioned the role of media and these TV shows, movies like The Social Network, and even just recently I've seen ads for the show Silicon Valley. And it's 6 men on the poster who are supposedly being these technology leaders. So I was wondering what thoughts and goals that you have towards changing that.
Yeah, such a great question. You know, I think that we have to hold people accountable, and I think we have to call people out when we see the lack of women in these positions, like Silicon Valley. I mean, I do believe that HBO, I know it's a sitcom, but they're perpetuating this myth, right, of women in the way that tech culture is. And I think especially recently, right, we've seen a lot more sexism in tech companies and stories about what's happening, and it's going to silence women, and we don't want that to happen. And so I do think that we have to hold people accountable. You know, without naming names, there are companies that have tried to support or invest in Girls Who Code, and when I think that their mission is sexist, we have said no. And so we as an organization will not partner with those organizations, and we will call people out when we think that they're perpetuating these stereotypes that are discouraging young women from going into technology. I also think that we have to be really more proactive. So I'm really excited. We're going to launch a Girls Who Code in LA in 2015, and we're actually talking to a couple of different studios to host it at one of those places, because I do think of finding partners that are screenwriters, right, that are constantly thinking about how they can actually put these characters into their scripts, I think is really important. You know, the only prominent female scientist we've seen over the past year was in Gravity, right? And that's it. I even Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I don't think people see her as, quote, a hacker. We did a partnership with AMC. They're actually what's the name of the show, Charlotte? Catch a Fire. Right. So they have a really kind of cool computer scientist who's a woman who's in the show. So I think that we want to see more of that. I just did, I did a partnership with Barbie Entrepreneur, because they released an entrepreneur that was so I think seeing more of those instances and really encouraging that, I think is critical. We launched a partnership with CoverGirl to do a whole campaign on girls in coding. So it's happening. I think we just have to push more of it out there. And I think for those of you who are in spaces where you can influence it, I mean, I know there's a lot of men in those fields and they're fathers. And you see what's happening with your little girls. And oftentimes they're our biggest advocates.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. I do think Silicon Valley is something of a caricature in that show, but there's a lot about it that's real. And if they had said it here in New York City, you would have had a different story, because New York is much more friendly to female entrepreneurs. Just is. Anybody else?
Hi. I also have had really wonderful experiences in my life as a mentor, but when I used to teach, but I don't teach anymore, so it's kind of not built into my daily life. So I was wondering if you had any recommendations of avenues to become a mentor or organizations to get involved with, including yours.
Well, we'd love for you to come be a mentor. I know Cambio and AOL, right, is having opportunities for AOL employees to mentor Girls Who Code.
Yeah, please. Nisha Dua's right over there. Right here?
Thanks. Sorry. I'm sitting here with Elira and Helena. We're all on a tech team, and we would love to bring these young ladies to meet the rest of the HuffPost tech team. I think it would be great. I'm sure we can work that out. But my question is, as I'm a big brother of a 8-year-old little sister, she's the best, but how do we change the conversation at home? You talked about dads being one of the biggest advocates. How can we get more involved?
So I just did a voiceover for a Verizon campaign called Inspire Her Mind. So I would watch that video, but it's basically like about the subtle things we do as parents to discourage our girls to create or build. And I think we have to watch ourselves, right? When my father was telling, he's got 3 grandkids, 1 boy and 2 girls. And when he was fixing the crib, he kind of naturally called Kaden over and been like, hey, do you want to help me? Instead of asking the girls to. And so I think being cognizant of that, of how we do that and the subtle messages that we're sending our young girls is really important. But even for you as her brother, take her to a maker fair. Build something with her. Create something with her. Get Scratch for Dummies. You can teach her as young as 5 years old, how to build a video game. I do that with my niece. I mean, there's little things that you can do to start getting that type of like creativity and inspiration and the desire to build and create within her at a very young age.
Okay, we'll take one more question and then I'm going to do the fast round. Okay.
Hello. Hi, Reshma. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. So you mentioned before that you ran for office and it didn't work. So I think one of the hardest things for women in business is understanding how to get back up after you failed and dust yourself off. And I think for men, it's easier. Like other guys like, get back in the game, dude. And how did you do that? How do you come back from something like that?
Yeah, I think that we live in a society that's very ashamed of failure. And especially for women, right? We think we got to do the job before we apply for the job. Men are so comfortable with rejection, right? Very young age, you hit on a woman, she tells you to piss off, you do it again, right? Over and over and over again. We don't do that. So I think for me, it's, I visualized and took myself through, all right, what was going to happen if I lost in every single scenario, which eventually happened, right? I was humiliated, I was broke, I pissed off everybody, and I was still standing over that. So I kind of prepared myself for that mentally, and I think that that's really important. I also kind of gave myself 2 months to mourn, right? To drink a bunch of margaritas, to like harass my husband about it, to just get it all out, and then to move on. And then the third thing is I have built a career, I would say, over the past year about encouraging failure. I talk about it all the time. How I cried, how I was upset, what happened, like all of it. And I think instead of trying to paint it as a success, because it wasn't a success, I lost, right? I've embraced my failure and committed to doing it again. I think, in my political life, I really realized that the world just wasn't ready yet. As diverse of a city we are, my name's still Reshma Suajani, but it will be one day. It will be in the next 10 years, hopefully. And I'll be there when it is. And that's why I think I love computer science, right? Because it's hard. You fail all the time, and then you got to get back and do it again and do it again. It's frustrating. You don't get the answer the first time. It doesn't work out the first time. But our girls are so resilient. Same thing with me. Like, I can handle a lot now. And I think that I live my life in that way where Sheryl Sandberg is, someone, I email her at least 5 times a month asking her for outrageous things. And 3 out of 5 times she says yes. And so I put myself out there and invite rejection. And it's healthy for me.
And something great came out of that failure because it was out of that you started Girls Who Code.
I wouldn't have started Girls Who Code.
Yeah.
Had it not been for that experience.
Yeah. And sometimes something happens in the course of where you think you're going, right?
Yeah. Well,
On
everyone
the
tells
way
me, right, I
to-
lost my public advocate race to come
Yeah.
back and to run my organization
Yeah.
and to go then from 300 girls to 3,000 girls over my, you know, so absolutely, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes you can't see it. But I think that failure is so important.
And it happens to everybody, so
Yeah.
you have to get comfortable with it.
Yep.
Okay, we'll do the fast round. What's the one app you can't live without?
Twitter.
What was the first thing you built?
The first thing I built.
Doesn't have to be an app. It could be anything you built. A playhouse.
Probably jewelry of some sort when I was young.
What celeb did you have posters of on your wall?
Now.
No, not now. I'm hoping you're past that phase.
Back in the day, Duran.
How do you recharge every day?
Hanging out with my dog.
Walking?
Walking, playing,
Yeah.
singing to it.
Growing up, what did you want to be?
I always wanted to be a lawyer and a politician.
And you got both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor Swift or Miley Cyrus?
Oh my God. Charlotte's whispering, Taylor Smith.
Right answer. Okay, we're going to have to close, but I thank you for being a great audience.
Thank you,
and
everyone.
I want to thank Reshma for giving us her time this afternoon and for giving us her girls. And I would just ask all of you, any of you, to Facebook, tweet, Instagram, something that a woman in your life has built. And again, it doesn't have to be an app, although apps are good. And just make sure you add the hashtag #BuiltByGirls. Thanks, everyone.